Hello, everyone. I'm Dev Conboy, and today we're going to talk about the basics of supply chain management. If you guys know what supply chain management, or even simpler, just a supply chain, the definition of a supply chain is a system of organizations, people, activities, information, and resources involved in moving a product, a service from a supplier to a customer. Supply chain activities include the transformation of natural resources, raw materials, and components into a finished product that is delivered to the end user. In a sophisticated supply chain system, used products may re-enter the supply chain at any point where residual value is recyclable. Supply chains link value chains. So basically what this is saying is that a supply chain is kind of how the product gets from where it is developed, where it is made, to the end user. And today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about how that works and how we define certain terms in the supply chain. So supply chain management is the process of managing this whole supply chain. Technically, it is the management of the flow of goods and services and includes the movement and storage of raw materials, work in progress inventory, and finished goods from point of origin to point of consumption. So managing that process from getting that, the raw materials, the basic building blocks of what your product is going to be into the hands of the consumer, and making sure from point A to point B that everything is solid and is designed to make that end user product a lot better is the process of supply chain management. It's the refining process of taking that each step along the way and refining it to make that product at the end just a lot better. So, whether it's taking a raw material and sourcing it from a different component, or ensuring your logistics are 100% in check. Anything that has to do with making that end product better via redefining the way it is narrowed down throughout the chain is technically supply chain management. And this is industry agnostic, meaning that this isn't something that just happens in a certain field. It happens in pretty much any manufactured good to end user product. I mean, it's a term for describing the point of origin to the consumer. So it really applies to every single aspect of business, not only manufacturing, but it's more of on a larger macro scale that this term really applies. So now we're going to take a look at the actual supply chain and how it looks. As you can see on the left-hand side, you have kind of examples on the top going down and then back up from the left to right. You have kind of examples of what each segment of the supply chain kind of entails. This is a basic supply chain, and then you kind of see the steps along the way. And then on the bottom, you have a specific example. So you see we have the raw material supplier all the way on the top left. And that then goes to the supplier. So when manufacturing goods, you need raw materials, and those come together to make a portion of what that final product will be, and that's the supplier. They give it to your supplier, which is the company you will be buying from, and then that supplier then assembles all the supplier's goods and then makes what is the finished good, a laptop in this case. That laptop is then distributed to wholesalers, which are basically middlemen between the stores you buy the product from and the manufacturing company. And then the wholesaler distributes it to a retailer. The front-end retail is where you walk in and actually buy the product. And then there's you, the end customer. So in this example, we see this laptop. And to get a laptop, you go down the supply chain to the left. You need a keyboard on your laptop. And that's just a specific example. They're multifaceted. You can make one, for a laptop with everything. I mean, there's so many components to a laptop, but in this specific instance, they just chose keyboard. The keyboard needs how do you assemble a keyboard? Companies like Apple will buy the keyboard from other companies that will specifically manufacture keyboards. So they assemble then the raw materials, the plastic granulate in this case, and they need the raw materials, the crude oil, to do that. And then Apple will buy the laptop manufacturer, in this case the retailer. They cut out the kind of wholesaler, their model specifically. But the retailer will buy the keyboard, buy all the parts, manufacture the good, and then ship it to their retail units to eventually put it in the hands of the end customer. So here's another slide kind of showing you what that looks like. At the top, you see there is a beach sand. Intel actually buys beach sand to make silicone for their processors, and they do this in ultra clean rooms, but they are this a good supply chain. In the supply chain, Intel will go to companies and buy raw materials, which is sand, to make silicone for their processors, and then you have the processor, and then Apple will buy the processor for their computer. So technically, like if you really think about it, way down in the chain, eventually it gets to the beach. Nobody really knew that part of your laptop was from a beach in Mexico, but that's the beauty of understanding the supply chain. And then here we have another example of the factor markets to the consumer. You can move up or down this chain. This is just another generic example. You have different clients at the bottom, and then you have kind of how those clients obtain the product. Your products, your services, finances, info. Those are all things that you sell to the clients, and then you have the organization, and then the products above the organization are what that organization uses to eventually make that product. And then you have logistics in between, which will be another point in a second here. So the product in your hand is not the product in stage one. It never, who knew that, it's not like you can just go to the beach and pull out Apple MacBooks. The supply chain defines that your manufacturer is 100% separate than your raw material supplier, and there are many steps along the process. It's very different than the prototype. It is, the original MacBook that you bought has evolved over years and years. Since the 1970s when the first Macs came out. It's been refined so that each year they evolve. And it's completely different than the last generation. That's the next point. It's totally different than the product you had a couple years ago. So the supply chain actually refines the product over time. So now we're going to talk about spend management, and this is kind of like the supply chain process for how the money gets managed. So you see here you have information management, and that kind of rolls around to benchmark, procedure rates, routing guides, and shipment optimization. These are all the the kind of the money aspect of the supply chain management chain. You got carrier selection and shipment execution, and then freight audit and payment. So this kind of more aligns towards the logistics side of things. So who are the major companies in supply chain management? What are the tools they use, and how do they provide a niche to each subsection of the supply chain? Well, there are a bunch of companies today, such as Oracle, Cisco, SDI, CRM software companies. These are the companies that manufacture softwares for this, to get that end user supply chain. So, they include tools or modules to use to execute supply chain transactions, manage supplier relationships, and control associated business processes. Some of these softwares include CRM software, which is customer relationship management. That's basically when your customer has info that you need that's valuable to make that sale or that transaction, the software needs to store that. So a lot of times SEO and softwares on Google will take your information, take your cookies, your IP address, and then then your emails, all that kind of stuff, and put it in a database to where the company then can send email blasts, manage your clientele, get your portfolios all settled out and everything. It's so that the company can manage their relationship with you, the end user customer. Customer service management, that's another big one. I mean, the customer service is a huge aspect of businesses today. I mean, if you get a laptop that's broken from Apple, you're going to go back to the Apple store because you just paid $2,000 for a laptop. They need to track that inventory. They need to give you a new one or service it, and there's a whole process to that. And some of these softwares actually really help out with that. And then there's the other ones: demand management, style, order fulfillment, manufacturing flow management, supplier relationship management, and product development and commercialization. All of these software are they tailor each specific software to each individual process, and these are some of the major companies that make them. So the supply network. So you have that source product, you have everything in between, and then you have the end product. Businesses refine their supply chain strategy as they discover what improvements they can develop each year. Analysis and visibility are two very big factors in this process. Materials, the supplier, and the customer. The relationship between the interorganizational supply chain. So you have materials, you have information, and you have cash, and it's all flowing back and forth like the yin and the yang. You see, the customer and the supplier don't have too much interaction. That you have all these middlemen, and the most profitable companies are actually cutting these middlemen out, doing the process themselves, and finding ways to cut costs. Here's a great diagram that outlines the supply chain. On the left, you have the manufacturers, the trucks that go to collaborative warehouses, take it there to the companies, the non-urban, the urban, and then eventually to the stores. It's a great diagram, and it kind of outlines, about how you can see the whole operation in progress. Logistics, inbound and outbound. That's a huge, huge part, as you can see here. Like this truck. It's part of a supply chain. It's a huge logistics is a huge portion of the heart of the, I guess, supply chain. You have, in this example here, an apple farm, the bottle manufacturing plant. How are they going to get the plastic to the bottle manufacturing plant? How are they going to get the labeling to the bottling plant? How are they going to get the apples and the products to the firms and then distribute out to national and then regional shops, retails, supermarkets, that kind of thing. So logistics plays a huge role, and they spend a lot of money on doing that. So where does the ownership transfer? A lot of times businesses will actually own a product until it is delivered, and sometimes it is on the buyer to pay for logistics. The terms for this is FOB, ship, and destination. FOB, ship point, means that you own the product as the manufacturer until it is in the hands of your customer. FOB destination means the opposite. When the customer places the order and you ship it off, right there it transfers to the customer. So this could be kind of a deal breaker in some business deals, just because people don't want to pay for logistics, and something happens to your product, you might be liable for it. So it's typically better for FOB destination, but it's a negotiation point. So here's an operating model for next gen market engagement. The supply chain is differing a little bit because your social media, your advertising, everything is moving to a digital platform. You've got email, telephone, webcast. So that kind of affects the supply chain in the fact that all these manufacturers are now pushing their own products, or can push their own products. It no longer requires such a crazy, mobile, in-person operation to set up a retail. You can set up an online retail and have a warehouse attached to your factory. So there's a lot of different things coming into play, data analytics, that kind of thing. And that brings me to the point, like combining these fields, like these, analytics are huge, in the supply chain, because how are you going to know who your customers are, what they want, that kind of thing. So that's my presentation, and I hope you guys enjoy.